This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
Sorry, let me take a step back. Not extreme left and extreme right. It's been a long day.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a podcast about politics and power in New York State government. And this is an emergency bonus episode following the announcement late on Friday afternoon, about 2 hours ago as of the time we're recording, that Representative Elise Stefanik is suspending her bid for governor and will not seek re-election to the House, where she has served since 2015. This is a developing story, so we'll probably learn more about why she dropped out and the behind-the-scenes machinations that led up to this point. But we wanted to assess the GOP gubernatorial landscape as it exists now. So we're checking in with Chapin Fay, a Republican strategist who, despite his boyish looks, actually is old enough to have worked for a statewide GOP official. Thanks for making the time on short notice, Chapin.
Thanks, David. I am old enough to have worked for the last Republican governor, if that's what you meant, which seems like a long time ago now. That is a long time ago now.
Yeah, but like I said, you look like you could have just been a child at that point. Just couldn't have even voted for Pataki.
That's what I have going for. That's all I got going for me, David. It's my boyish charm and good looks.
Well, before they go away, let's just jump right into it. And first of all, I'm curious, does the field seem set to you now? Is Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman the presumptive GOP nominee for governor, or should we be bracing for late entries into the race now that Stefanik is out?
We have to assume the county executive, the presumptive nominee. It is a very short sprint to a convention, which has to, by law, happen, I think, before the last week of February. So if someone, for example, Representative Lawler had thought about getting in, if he hasn't advanced, putting a team together or strategy or talking to chairs or anything like that, you're really kind of far behind. The county executive has been pushing behind the scenes in the inside baseball phase of this campaign, right? Calling chairs and committee people and making his case. And I do know that he was getting a good response.
So returning to Stefanik, she basically said in a tweet late Friday afternoon that she's not running in order to avoid a GOP gubernatorial primary, which she rightfully notes would not be an effective use of time or resources in a state like New York, where you need to have everybody rowing in the same direction from day one if you're trying to win as a statewide Republican. But if she thought that she was the only one who could unseat Governor Kathy Hochul, which is basically the tone of her campaign ever since Blakeman jumped in, then what are you inferring or speculating about Stefanik's decision to pull the pin on her campaign at this early stage, late stage, I guess depending on how you look at it?
Well, I want to say a couple of things before I actually answer your question.
Sure.
One, we talked about this already on the last time I was on your show. I don't necessarily think primaries are horrible. I think it can strengthen candidates. That being said, these two candidates don't really need all that much testing, right? They're both successful in their own areas of the state, very successful. The county executive has run statewide before. So I don't think they needed this primary to sharpen messaging and all that kind of stuff. So, and then the other thing I wanted to say is, Representative Stefanik deserves a lot of credit again here. She seems to be taking a big one for the team. There's no question that if these two went at each other, I think it would be a hindrance for the ultimate winner, even if it was her. And, the way you win a primary these days, you run to the right for 6 months, you've won this primary, and now you got to almost run the exact opposite direction to start attracting a bigger coalition. Because as you know, it's Democrats, Independents, and Republicans third in voter registration. So Republicans need to attract non-Republican votes. That's a point for County Executive Blakeman. Nassau County demographics mirror the state at large. Blakeman's exit poll showed he won Hispanics, independent women, and got over 30% in the African American community, which is outrageous for a Republican, which usually gets 9. If you hit double digits, you're really doing well. I think he's a real case to be made on electability. He's also conservative, right? So he satisfies a lot of what Republicans are looking for. But your question about why, she didn't really indicate why. She did have support. She seemed to have some momentum. Bruce Blakeman getting in certainly complicated it. Like I said, I heard, I know he got a good reception from the people he was calling, even though a lot of them were behind Elise already. She does have a child, and running for governor is hard, exhausting. This is a gigantic state.
She didn't adopt that child, though, in the last month, though. It's a 4-year-old. I hope it wasn't a surprise.
It's true. It's true, but she was, what was she, number 3 in the House? She was preparing for confirmation hearings. She's been running at full speed basically since she was first elected. That's a long time, especially for a relatively new mother. So you never know. It could be family excuse is true. It could be that there are other motivations behind it. I think she does deserve some credit here for doing the right, I won't say doing the right thing, doing the thing she thinks is right. I do think this clears a path. This widens the county executive's path immensely. I think he had a path already, but I think this widens it. Listen, I usually don't drink the Kool-Aid. I like to be dispassionate, unemotional. My candidates think I don't like them because I try to be even keeled. But I think he has the best shot we have of taking the governor's mansion back since George Pataki.
So you say take one for the team, but her statement doesn't even include an endorsement of Bruce Blakeman. This is a pretty self-serving exit as far as I'm concerned. This is not one where she says, it's important that we beat Governor Kathy Hochul as Republicans, and therefore I think Bruce Blakeman is the right guy to run as a Republican if we want to avoid a primary. So if she is serious about this, do you anticipate or do you expect to see her campaigning with Blakeman in the short run or maybe in the long term?
You caught that, huh?
And it's a lengthy statement. There's no limits on her tweets and how long she can write.
Yeah, I don't know if you're doing video, but I'm smirking. You caught it. But in any case, maybe it's too early. Maybe she's going to get out of politics, right? Maybe, it still would make sense regardless of what she does. I mean, she's got a district that loves her, right? So she should be out there at least in her own district. I suspect she will be. It's a difficult decision to make, the decision that she made, particularly after going full bore. For however many months she's been doing it.
1 month full bore, and a lot of months playing footsie.
And in this era, it feels like 1 month can take a year off your life, David. So particularly I've been on those campaigns. I've been inside those campaigns. Probably took a year off the staffer's life already. Like I said, this is a gigantic state. And when people, like members of Congress or, county executives start, he's done it before. But if you haven't run statewide before and you start, not one candidate I've worked for has not said to me, boy, this is a big state. How do you get from Long Island to Buffalo for 2 events in one day? It takes some logistics. So again, I suspect she'll be there for whoever the candidate is. I suspect she'll have a say in who replaces her. I was surprised, just like you and everyone else, that she said she wasn't running for Congress either. Who knows?
For the holiday season, Dispatches from Planet Albany is offering a special gift when you support the show. A $50 contribution or recurring commitment of $5 a month gets you a 12x9 poster celebrating life in Planet Albany. More information, including a link to donate, can be found wherever you listen to this podcast. Support for Dispatches from Planet Albany provided by National Fuel. Natural gas delivers affordable, reliable energy to millions of New Yorkers every day. Trusted utilities are committed to keeping homes warm, businesses running, and communities thriving. Natural gas is a critical part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy, one that prioritizes sustainability for the Empire State's future. Learn more at betterplannobans.com.
Well, it sounded like you thought she was done with politics, given what she said about not running for governor and not running for re-election. But the race for president is, less than 3 years away now. And while we have a UN ambassador, maybe she'd like to keep her options open there. I mean, what do you see as her future politically if she does want to stay involved? I mean, is there a path for a potential former member of the House from a teeny tiny district in New York, not geographically speaking, but population wise, to be a credible contender for president?
Sure. I think you touched on something that's interesting that I hadn't thought about. It's going to be much better for her to run for president if that is her ambition, as a former member of Congress who took one for the team a couple of times, is owed some favors, as opposed to someone who was involved in a slash and burn. Because I'm not saying she would do that, but that's how these things evolve naturally, organically, a slash and burn primary campaign. And there's always a chance she loses that, and there's a chance she loses to Governor
Sure.
Hochul. Then she's an out of work member of Congress, and have just lost a statewide election. She can now take this time and figure out how to keep herself relevant. I do think if I were advising her, I would say, helping whoever the Republican nominee eventually is part of that path. So we're not even 1 year into the Trump administration. We're hitting 1 year. There's 3 years left. There'll be cabinet positions. I think she's earned a look for, a whole litany of roles in the Trump administration or internationally, right?
Yeah, but this president has never really been one to reward loyalty. And as we saw, she took one for the team, as you said, with the UN ambassador role, and he couldn't even bring himself to publicly endorse her to help her potentially clear the field.
And that could be a major reason, that could be a major reason that President Trump did not shut down a Bruce Blakeman candidacy.
Yeah.
Right. And he could have, I think.
Definitely.
He likely could have. Right. And so that complicated her path. Running for office statewide in New York as a Republican requires an almost flawless campaign from start to finish. It's just a complicated, hard slog of a job, and maybe she wasn't having any fun. I once asked when I was Harry Wilson's campaign manager, I asked the general consultant when this was going to start getting fun, and he said he was Pataki's campaign manager in 2002, and he said it's not going to, but you're going to miss it after Election Day. And that is the best description of a campaign I've ever heard. It's hard work. And I will also say it's the right thing to do to not go forward if you have second thoughts. You have to believe you can win, and you have to be all in, particularly in something like this. Right? If you're running in a predominantly Republican congressional campaign, maybe you don't have to be all in. Maybe you can take a few days off. If you're running for governor, there's no day off. There's no second off.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because there's this idea of Stefanik as this really strong candidate, and I think that's largely among people who know her from her national profile. But if you look at the races she's won, she's not been challenged within her own party like what we're seeing now in 2026. She hasn't had to compete in a purple, let alone a blue seat the way Bruce Blakeman has. And if we look at the way she responded and her campaign responded when Blakeman jumped in, which was supposed to have a complete meltdown, freak out, it just didn't seem
a mistake.
Like they were ready for any of this, and that her campaign has always been kind of like a paper tiger. It's one of the reasons I thought she was never even going to get in the race to begin with, because it's one thing to talk about the worst governor in America and to say, oh, I'm going to win. I mean, it's reminiscent to me of Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin, who's said, oh, if I ran for governor, I'd win, but never actually does. So I just wonder how seriously we should have taken all this, and maybe we should have seen this coming from months ago now.
I don't know about that. You alluded earlier to some challenges her candidacy would have, right? There's a pros and cons to every single candidate. And I'm not here to kick someone on the way out the door. Like I said, I think she should be commended and supported. And but she is from the northernmost part of the state, a very non-diverse part of the state, and a conservative part of the state. So she was going to have a challenge downstate, and running for governor is almost entirely different. It's a different thing than running for re-election after a couple of victories, and it's knocking off an incumbent member of Congress is one of the most difficult things to do in politics, right? She had a lot of Washington people on our team. I think some of them probably were surprised at how different this was. So how do you win in a red seat, congressional seat, that Trump is popular and the media hates you, and there's not much media, right? So how do you win and be successful? You run against the media, you get into fights with the media, you call them names, You make sure you rile up your own base, which, running against the media helps when you're not going to get good stories anyway. You're not going to get good press anyway. You try and minimize Democrat turnout. You try and get as many Republicans as you can to turn out. That is just not how you run a successful gubernatorial race. I'm not saying that's what she would do. I'm just saying that's how members of Congress usually think and operate. Mm-hmm. So it's just very different, and it's hard. It's difficult for them when they run around the state. And by the way, the votes upstate, right? The population has declined since Pataki was in office. When Pataki was running, and I think he was probably the last of this happening. D'Amato ran this campaign and lost against Schumer, but upstate versus downstate. I've been saying this my whole life. I have to stop and update it. The conventional wisdom was a Republican has to win 2 of the 3 parts of the state, right? Long Island and upstate versus New York City. That's just not the case. Upstate doesn't have the numbers anymore. You can't run an upstate versus downstate race. You can't ignore upstate. But for example, Lee Zeldin lost by 6 points. And I hear a lot of people saying it's because he didn't do enough upstate, or I don't want to blame him. I thought he ran a decent campaign, and I'm a huge fan of his. But there are not 6 more points in upstate New York. There just are not. He could have spent the whole campaign there. There are just not 6 points in upstate New York, and there probably weren't 6 points. I haven't looked at numbers in years. There probably weren't 6 points for him on Long Island, because I suspect he had pretty high turnout on Long Island. Being a Long Island guy, and the 2 counties were working together. There's 6 points in the city. Maybe 2 points upstate, 2 points on Long Island, a point upstate, a point on Long Island, and then 4 points in New York City. It's this is a hill, as you know, I'm going to die on every single time we talk.
Well, yeah, let's move on from the greatest hits of Chapin Fay. And yes. Lastly, I want your sense of what we should expect now in terms of sales in 2026 for Elise Stefanik's planned book, Poisoned Ivies, the inside account of the academic and moral rot at America's elite universities, which is scheduled to be released in April. I mean, I feel like this is not going to help book sales.
I don't think she's going to have a real issue with book sales. That's my favorite of her issue profile. That's something I care about as well. And I think she is a international leader on it. That's something she could focus on and continue to bolster her reputation and run for president one day. I think, and I think the conservative, Republicans and conservatives and people who care about that across the country would be interested in her book. Like you said, she has a national profile. I think DC and national conservative events are really better for her book sales than a gubernatorial race anyway.
Hopefully she'll be able to find appropriate childcare, though, for those book tours.
It's true. Well, you got me there, David.
We've been speaking with Chapin Fay. He is a Republican strategist and founder, head honcho, chief bottle washer at Lighthouse Public Affairs.
That's right. Since I have to do everything, it's not a flex.
Well, Chapin, thanks for checking in with us late Friday night. I really appreciate you weighing in on this developing story.
Anytime.
Elise Stefanik will clean up Kathy Hochul's catastrophe and restore New York's greatness. Elise Stefanik for governor.